I'm very glad to have you all around in our discussion. The College of Business and Economics of AUA has a dedicated faculty that is always trying to do research on the hottest topics of our economy. And COVID-19 is one in a lifetime event that has changed fundamentally a lot of things. And we are going to talk about how exactly those changes are going to be reflected in Armenian reality. And I'm happy to show you what the results of our works have been. And our Center for Business Research and Development has conducted a study, and we asked 1,300 people about what were been their work experiences during the lockdown and immediately after. We completed this in late May, and after that, using both these results and something even more, much more data, juxtaposing data, triangulating them, our faculty tried to answer some of the very important questions, both on macroeconomics and microeconomics. What are the patterns? How they affect people? What to expect from the economy? And hopefully today's discussion will give you a lot of answers. All of these brief research notes that are not full-fledged working papers yet are posted on our Center for Business and Research and Development site at AUA. So anyone who is interested, they can look at this. Meanwhile, I would like to start our discussions with a broader overview, kind of a bird's eye view type of a picture. What is the general situation? And for that reason, I would like to ask Dr. Gurgen Aslanyan to start from that perspective. Dr. Aslanyan has done a study together with Armen Mirzoyan, who is a senior analyst at Fitch, looking at macroeconomic implications of COVID. And he has used different data to assess shocks that are coming both from demand and supply sides. Dr. Aslanyan, would you please start?
I do that with pleasure. Can I please get the right to share a note? Meanwhile, I want to say that Armen Mirzoyan is from Moody's Analytics.
I'm sorry.
I think that would be important for them. Can you see the script?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with just saying that actually we are trying to measure the foregone output. So we're not going to say everything what's happening in Armenia because of the COVID-19. We are going to get as much as possible of two major things that we were thinking that is going to be important. So as I said, it's a work with Mirzoyan Armen, and actually he is from Moody's Analytics. So maybe I have to do the disclaimer instead of him and say that don't take it as a background for making your investment. This is him in private capacity as a researcher. So what I started with in the paper, and it's the same over here, it's just that words with Paul Samuelson saying how markets predicted 9 out of past 5 recessions. And I really hope that we are also going to be proven wrong, that we'll just be ridiculed because of all this nonsense that we got, because actually the answers are that the economy is going to go down quite a bit, and this is something that none of us really will want to happen, but I guess most of us are expecting to happen. There is the famous 90% economy thing that actually says that the world is going to go down 10%. We're expecting much more in Armenia according to our studies. And it's in many countries, actually, they are forecasting a lot down and a lot more, but we are just going to say what we got. So what we do is a forecasting exercise, what's going to happen to Armenia on the production and consumption side, some part of it, and this is going to be not only forecasting, but actually a lot of it is a nowcasting and even a hintcasting, because we don't really know much what exactly is happening. So we'll just go in different parts and do the usual thing that the forecasting business people are doing, that we will just go and try to understand what's happening. So this picture, most of you already know, it's just very much around that. It's like everybody is just worried about the COVID wave over there coming, but actually the recession is much larger and maybe the climate change is going to take over and destroy everything. What most probably we are doing, getting somewhere in between the red and blue parts, and we are just going to say that actually we are predicting something that is coming to the economy more than the COVID exactly, but actually some part of things may be coming later on that we don't know what we are expecting in general. But what we are going to do, what is our focus? So we are measuring the foregone output as much as we can for the 2020 year in Armenia. And we're going to go on the supply side, that is all different industries that we are having. Most of it is done on the CBRD data that we have collected on the COVID that we know, and then much of it is just the labor data that we are using, and people who have been losing their jobs, those people who have been laid off because of the COVID, those people who have decreased salaries because of the COVID, and a lot of others. We augmented the data with the National Statistics of Armenia from Central Bank and the Statistical Office of Armenia, and we enforced all our logic with the news and the analytics different than we found, and the anecdotal evidence, the usual forecasting thing that people are doing. On the demand side, we are looking mostly on the remittances, and as you can see, that's already saying a lot. There may be a lot of other things that may come from the demand side based on whatever is going to be the multiplier of the policy that the government are having and anything else. We are not looking at those. We are not looking at those. And people may just react differently, and this is this time that actually I wish this is going to happen. It's like the usual the quote that goes to JFK that says that when you write crisis in Chinese, it comes in two characters. The first of them is a danger, and the second one is opportunity. Well, the reality is that the second one is not opportunity. The second character over there that is standing is the starting point. So when we're putting over in Chinese what crisis is the starting point of a danger. But as the JFK speech was going over there, let's recognize that it may be an opportunity, that it's a starting point for something new and we can take over. So hopefully the Armenian economy will just take it as something very new that is going to be and prove our forecast wrong and do everything so that we'll be surprised how different the whole reality will be. But what we are actually getting over there are the numbers that I'm going to show you over here. This is the usual breakdown of the GDP that we are having, and we are just getting, this is the percentage of the GDP, the losses that we are going to get in different parts of the economy that we are getting. And you can see already that the March or maybe April is the largest one that is getting, like the 43% of the GDP, you can say that is not being produced. And then you can see that our forecast is just getting less and less for the other months. And then the major parts where we are getting losses are highlighted over there. The first one is maybe not that important, but actually the red one that goes on the first one, the art and entertainment. Many people will think that this is the important one. Maybe economically it's just like above 4% in the month of April, and then actually it gets up to 2% less of the GDP being produced from the art and entertainment. And given many of the behavioralists would say that actually keeping the moods and the animal spirits up, as Vartan Bagdasaryan will talk at some point, I guess, is going to just show that this is something very important that we are having. Then we have predicted, as you can see, the trade and manufacturing and the real estate activities going down a lot in the first parts, and then there is some part that is going also to be missing in already the third and fourth quarter of the economy that we are getting. In construction, actually, we had a lot of losses in the first part of the year, but we are predicting that nothing is going to, the economy will come back to the usual. There are many people that actually say that the construction cannot be the same. Now, the missed months of the March, April, and May, they will actually overdo, but our different estimates and our understanding and our talks with the specialists in the field and the analytical prediction of how the construction field is going predicted that they are not going to overdo what they will do. They will just continue on the level, whatever there was. It's just that missed output will be over there. And then we have actually a big miss over there for the agriculture and forestry and fishing part over that we are going to get. And by the end of the year, you can see that it's getting lower and lower, mostly because there is not that much of the missing over there that is going to be, and mostly because we didn't presume that actually there is going to be a second wave of an epidemics over there. We didn't go over thinking that there may be something really big and important happening that many people are predicting. We are still sticking with our understanding that this is the economy, and we are predicting whatever is happening in the economy by the COVID-19 at the moment, and we are not predicting the future, what will be with the epidemics and how it will affect the economy. And then on the demand side, actually, we just try to see what's happening on the remittances. And then we got that in the remittance, if we are trying to look at it, it is a very much something that is going with the Russian economy. All we know that actually remittances mostly come from the Russian economy. Many of us knew this, and very few of us would know that actually if we try to make the estimates over there, because we didn't find that exactly done in the literature, that we will have that it's going very much hand in hand with the Russian economy. And then we are just seeing over here, in some cases it comes with a lag, but then most of the other times it's just predicting very nice how much Armenian economy is going to be. So, or remittances in Armenia are going to be. As you can see, the blue line is the Russian economy, the annual change year on year, and then we're just having the orange one, the Armenian remittances, and based on that we are making our predictions. So what we have is that the blue line would be that actually what we would expect, or what Moody's Analytics would expect, is going to be after when we're still in February with the Russian economy, and the green line is what actually in June already Moody's Analytics is forecasting what's going to happen to Russian economy. And based on that, we made our own calculations, and then you can see from the green line over here how much missing of the remittances, the usual money that is coming to Armenia, is going to be. Many of us will remember that actually the remittances got about 20% of the economy. Currently it's much down, or currently, last year it is down something like 12% of the economy, and it was going down, but now we are going to have much less. You can see actually in the second and the third quarters, we were just expecting actually the third of the remittances not to be there. And this is the nice scenario where we didn't even think much, because we didn't find data and we didn't make a strong argument over there that many of the Armenian workers actually came back to Armenia and didn't have chance to go back to their country to make, or to Russia, to make the money again back. And then in the fourth quarter, we just got that actually the remittances will be up, and the up is just that quarter of it is just going to be down. So this is the end result that we got. It's just a very basic thing, just looking at the remittances and the output production down, what we are predicting from the labor market, and we can see that those are the quarterly estimates of how much less we are going to get, and the annual, this will be something over 17% of the missed output in the Armenian economy because of the COVID. And that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you. And if you have questions, I'm very happy to take some of them.
Thank you, Dr. Aslanyan. I believe that questions will come later when everybody talks. It will be much easier to summarize them and group them. I would like to ask Dr. Haik Kamalian to make some comments also on the macroeconomic type of situation, because after that we are going to get detailed micro analysis. Particularly, there is another piece by Dr. Aslanyan and Dr. Bagdasayan, who is getting into microeconomic behavior, saving patterns, etc., which is quite interesting, especially when discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the behavior and social safety nets. Please.
Thank you so much. Dr. Aslayan basically gave a presentation about possible developments from the quantitative point of view. I'll try to make a couple of qualitative points regarding the logic of this crisis, and also I will concentrate on two important factors. First of all, this is basically if you're thinking about the basic economy, this is nothing else but a huge disaster shock, right? So if we are comparing this recession coming from the COVID-19 to the previous one, the global financial crisis, now we are having some part of our productive capabilities and capital just destroyed and diminished. So obviously it's going to take some time in order to get back to the normal track. So I just want to concentrate on two important things, the consequences. First of all, I do believe that it has been some time. We are witnessing the consequences of the pandemic, and we have some understanding about it. So I guess nowadays the most important factors, or I would say one of the most important factors that's affecting the economy, is the expectations and uncertainty. And in this case, I would also like to mention about economic policy related uncertainty. So we are basically in a world of a lot of uncertainties coming from the economy. That's when are we going to have basically the lockdown over, or what's going to be the developments on the public health side. But as the latest research shows, policy itself is kind of increasing this uncertainty. So in that sense, it would be kind of interesting to see what's the contribution of the policy-related uncertainty to overall uncertainty. And that's something that we have to kind of look into it when some time passes. So I would just mention a couple of previous research that were looking basically at this issue, and then they basically found a nice example regarding the Fed. So the research basically says if Fed was able to assess the uncertainty regarding the 2009 crisis, so it could basically be able to reduce the negative impact of overall economic uncertainty on the economy by 2 times. So this is, I guess, one of the most important things nowadays that we should think about. That's the overall economic uncertainty and the negative consequences of that. And the second aspect of this crisis, from macro perspective, is the potential impact of the COVID-19 on inequality. So we could think of inequality like intergenerational inequality, social inequality. We know that the schools and universities are basically closed now, and this is basically a negative shock to human capital investment now. So we are going to witness the effects of these negative developments probably in the future, not in the midterm. But I am mostly interested in the effect of COVID-19 on income inequality. And then, as we are witnessing, there is no data, unfortunately, published data from the statistical office, but we can basically witness the fact that the mostly low-skilled workers are basically suffering from this pandemic and from lockdown, and those with advanced educational background are basically could switch to kind of remote jobs. I believe that we are going to discuss. We will have some talks regarding this thing. And so I do believe that this crisis is going to increase the inequality in the Armenian economy, and that's going to be much higher than the one that we had during the global financial crisis of 2000 and 2009. So those were kind of the most important 2 points that I would like to basically mention regarding the macro aspects of this pandemic.
Now, thank you, Mike. Now I'm going to ask to take on Dr. Bagdasaryan, and this is one of the most important aspects as far as policy design is concerned, because Dr. Bagdasaryan is going to talk about policy stimuli, fiscal stimuli, and also what is causing financial strain and whether the precautionary savings have mitigating effects. I believe this is quite informing to policymakers and what we can make judgments about what is going to work and what is not. I'm not going to overpromise that this is going to tell every detail of what policy should be, but I think that Dr. Baldasaryan and Dr. Aslanian have very interesting insights. Please, Dr. Baldasaryan.
Thank you, Dr. Gavrilyan, and thanks, Gurgen and Haik, for presenting the macro background of what is happening. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn into the micro aspect. In particular, what I will be presenting is mostly based on the results of the survey that CBRD has conducted in May, if I'm not mistaken. So it was just after the lockdown was lifted. So I would encourage you to consider these results, keeping in mind that the time period has already changed a bit. The dynamics is different now a bit in terms of epidemics, but in general, what we will be focusing on is this short-term lockdown effect and how it changed the behavior or what we think about the changes in the behavior. What we're particularly interested in is what Gurgen started to discuss is understand that this is it has become as a now an aggregate demand shock. Of course, it was initiated as a supply shock, but the demand shock is there. And then the government is intervening with its fiscal and monetary policies, creating stimulus for people to spend so that the economy can go on. Now, this animal spirits idea is that how certain or uncertain you are about the future and what do you feel about the future. Would you spend the money if you have them, or would you be kind of hesitating? And we'll understand that this hesitation is going to create problems because the government is spending money to create additional demand. But if people are not responding behaviorally the way they are expecting to be responding, then this creates additional problems. So, and there are studies that show that it doesn't matter whether you have the money or no, in times of recessions or in these times of this drastic crisis, usually people are reluctant to spend the money. And then we're trying to understand what are the factors that might be mitigating this. And what we're interested in particular in this case are the savings. First of all, we would like to understand the extent to which people are saving in Armenia, because this is in its own interesting statistics, which is not widely available. How wide is saving in our economy in terms of population? Because if you look at the banking reports, the savings might seem very large. In fact, they might not be that large. So first of all, what we observe, we see that the shock is overwhelming. 20% have at least one person in their household who lost a job, 40% experiencing salary decrease. Among the respondents, almost 35% were either losing their jobs or they were asked to go on unpaid leave. So we see that there is a major income shock happening at that time. And then what we try to do, we try to understand what is happening to people who are having savings. But first of all, let's see who do have these savings. It turns out that if you look at the distribution of people that claim to have savings, you can immediately see that those who are laid off or who are fired, or basically those who were very vulnerable to this situation, these are the ones who have the least savings accumulated. And this immediately creates a problem. So what we try to do, we try to understand two things. First of all, there is an objective financial strain that you might feel, and this is the situation when we measure it with your inability to pay your bills, which means that you are in financial distress. And the second is a perceived financial distress, when you feel that you are financially hit more than the others. And then we try to understand whether the fact of having savings, just the fact of having savings, because we don't know how much they save and how pervasive this saving is, whether this is anyhow mitigating the perceived and actual severity of the crisis that people are experiencing. And to do this, what we do, we run some simple regressions. I don't want to overwhelm you with the technical details of our work, but this is what the central part of it. So people either say that they are financially hit more than the others or not. First of all, only 30% of respondents in our sample, out of about 1,000 respondents, said that they were hit less than the others. And then what we do, we kind of try to understand whether people are receiving government aid or not, what is their wage, whether they are high wage earners or low wage earners, whether they are self-employed, what is their occupation, and whether they have saving or not. And then what you need to look here at is the following. So financial hit more than the others, this would be the perceived financial distress. And ability to pay bills, that would be the actual one. And we see that in all our models that we run, really the savings are playing a role. So on top of what other factors are contributing, for example, the government aid doesn't seem to be really affecting people perceptions and actual ability. We're not claiming that the government aid, by the way, is not useful. It might be useful, but it might not be enough to pull you out of the financial distress. And it can be also claimed that, moreover, it's correct that the government aid is not pulling you out of the distress, because it should be directed to those who are most hit. And obviously, it should not be enough to pull you out of that. So what we see that having savings really can mitigate the situation. And what we think is that this can be used as an opportunity to design policies, to communicate policies that are increasing the propensity to save, because this crisis, which happened this time, and it happened, another crisis happened 10 years ago, another one will come in 5 or 10 years, we don't know, but the situation is going to be exactly the same, and we believe that having savings is going to ease the financial distress. Well, in a nutshell, this is what we have. Of course, this is not only about savings per se, but it's also about different types of financial, financial safety nets, like social networks that might help you out, persons who can give you money to borrow money for a short period of time. So all these systems are going to be helpful, but institutionalized savings are going to be helpful a lot. Well, that's in very short. Among other things that we have done, maybe this was the most important.
Thank you, Dr. Baldasaryan. I think this is quite interesting thing, and actually Paul Krugman was saying that as opposed to the previous crisis, which was mostly structural and finance related, this one is very unique in terms that it's not finance related and mostly it's about social safety nets. So savings is basically revolving around the same idea of safety nets, and now everybody's generally talking about outcomes and safety nets. I would like to ask Dr. Lushchan comment on the matter of unequal outcomes. This is a topic that comes through all the time, and you have a brief piece on the matter. Could you please elaborate on generally what the pandemic is going to do about the unequal outcomes?
Okay, thank you very much. Just a small beginning about this research I have done. This is probably one of the only research which I have done in the qualitative field, not quantitative field. But I have started this research a long time ago in terms of looking at the regulations that the government does. And it was a good opportunity for me to actually combine this research with this kind of event and actually even further emphasize how important it is to deregulate economy. Even the response of Armenian government towards this pandemic was very much invasive and was very kind of regulated, which I am a strong believer that it shouldn't be that way. So this said, let me share my screen and talk about the type of research I have done. So I call this inclusive virus exclusive outcomes because if we actually look to what is happening globally, the richest countries like Italy, US, UK have been infected the first. So, and if when we are looking to the cities like Milan, Moscow, and New York, we can see that the pandemic actually hit them first. So in the sense of the spread of the virus is not exclusive, it's very inclusive. So rich as well as poor are getting it. And actually at the beginning of the pandemic, rich countries and rich cities were getting it first because they were more travelers to the China and people were actually spreading the viruses in these cities and countries more. But what are going to be the economic consequences in terms of wealth redistribution? I do believe that as any crisis, this crisis as well is going to result in a bigger inequality. And when I talk about inequality, I think about inequality in two senses: inequality within a country and inequality between the countries. So for the within the country case, I actually looked to the US, and actually the last financial crisis had a big impact on the rise of inequality. But for today's research, I mostly want to talk about my expectations what's going to happen to Armenia and the rest of the world. So there are some predictions that IMF has been making. We can see there was an adjustment that they predict that the shrinkage is going to be even bigger. And there are some predictions for Armenia as well. Many people are putting models to actually see what's going to happen. I'm a strong believer of modeling, but in this particular case, there are so many aspects that the model should consider that I think a simple comparison and looking to the past can actually give us more information. So this is what I have for the GDP growth rate for the last financial crisis. So we can see that before 2008, the top one is the growth rate of Armenian GDP. The green line is for the world and the red line is for the US. And believing on the theory that the poor countries should grow faster so they can catch up with the developed countries. Everything was in terms of theory, macroeconomic theory is working fine. Then the crisis actually hit Armenia bigger than actually the rest of the world. Again, the green line is the rest of the world. They were close to zero versus Armenia was close to negative 15. But what I actually see, and this is very interesting for me, is that after the crisis that happened in 2008 and 2009, when we are looking to the years following this crisis, there is a change in the way that the world was developing. We can see that before the crisis, the difference or the gap between USA, rest of the world, and Armenia specifically was much bigger, meaning that USA was growing up at like 2-3%, world was on average growing with like more than 5%. After the crisis, however, the lines came closer to each other and continued that way. Armenia started having the same behavior as the rest of the world, and these lines being close to each other means that after the financial crisis that happened in 2008 and 9, the developing countries kind of lost that edge that the macroeconomic models are predicting, that they have to go faster so they can catch up with the world or in this case with the United States. So my prediction and what's seeing this and actually looking to what's happening globally in terms of the reaction of the countries. So this crisis due to the COVID is much bigger than it was before. it is still in progress because some countries are still keeping their borders closed. And there has been something that was actually very bothering, which is revaluation of the past values and policies. Previously, the world was talking about globalization, open borders. Now, every policy is self-centered. Even when we are looking to Europe that is opening up, they just open up between each other. They are even still closed for the United States. So what we are seeing is we are seeing countries actually deviating or going away from that idea of globalization. And with this introduction of social distancing and physical distancing that because of the pandemic has been introduced, in terms of economic expectations, I don't expect nice things to happen with the consumption. So with all of this said, I am a strong believer that we need to have our government, actually, Armenian government has to have some policies. And yes, I do understand all the issues with savings and reforms. But for me, specifically recently, I started really thinking about the deregulations that the government has to do. And with the new way of the business that is happening in terms of entrepreneurship, the way the small business is growing, the way the marketing is happening for small business, I'm a strong believer that what our Armenian government has to do is deregulate. And I mean specifically, in my research, I actually bring several examples which are specific. I unfortunately see that entrepreneurs in Armenia are being seen as an enemy in many cases, and they are being actually targeted. In terms of customs, by default, because Armenia is a small country, small and medium firms that are actually trying to export or import, they are penalized because of the scale effect. And the logistics in Armenia is actually very far from actually being close to perfect. We need a huge deregulations here. So what basically I suggest as an action plan for actually next 3 months is if for every week the government actually can introduce 3 deregulations, deregulating laws, requirements. Within 3 months, we are going to have 40 regulations either eliminated or actually made easy. And I do believe this is the one way of actually fighting the inequality in both ways within the country, inside of Armenia, giving opportunity to small and medium business to grow, as well as between Armenia and the rest of the world, because when we have a more vibrant small and medium entrepreneurship, our growth rate is going to be much bigger and faster. So this is how I see the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gushchan. I hope when you are talking about the regulation, you don't mean health regulations.
No, I mean...
They should stay in place, and everybody should wear masks and do everything as commandant says. Now, I would like to go into the business environment, and I would like to ask Dr. Beglarian go over her study, which is dealing mostly the impact on small and medium enterprises. Please, Dr. Beglarian.
Yes, Gabrielian, thank you very much. And actually, it fits very nicely because, as Dr. Gushchan talked about, the appraisal of entrepreneurial spirit and the importance of small medium enterprises, I actually would like to focus more and continue, particularly when it comes to policy implications, especially given a number of activities, so-called interventions that government of Armenia has undertaken. But first of all, why did I focus on SMEs? Because even in looking into cross-country perspectives, we see that small medium enterprises constitute to a very, very large proportion of any country's economy. In Armenia, those are registered as 70,000 SMEs and constituting to the 99.8% of all businesses of all types. In my study, what I focused was to see the number of sort of the harshness on SMEs that when it comes to furlough or forced leave and layoffs. And secondly, the reduction in pay. And I just wanted to share one of the graphs here. There are many more in the brief and then in the longer version of this research as a working paper series, where when we look at the distribution between men and women and in urban and rural areas, and when it comes to SMEs and compare it to the larger, actually in a major proportion, we see that SMEs are more inclined to lay off people. Actually, not that they're inclined, but they have less of opportunity or luxury to maintain the labor force and compared to the larger companies. This is because of SMEs specifically being poor on resources and having less cash reserves. So with the first shock like this, many more employees were let go than those of large companies. What is also important to note that within, even looking at the industry, when we have represented by SMEs and larger companies, what's essential that from the policy perspective, when there were more deferrals for income or corporate tax and direct assistance to SMEs, that was more appraised rather than any kind of other forms. And more so in instances where the work could be actually organized remotely, such as in the sphere of ICT services or education, then those businesses, irrespective if those are large or small, were able to maintain their human capital. As well as, in addition to that, this gives another interesting implication that when you have qualifications such as medium to high qualifications, then those employees are also able to be dynamic and to refocus their skills through upskilling and reskilling, particularly when SMEs strive to introduce more digitalized operations and organize their work differently. Of course, for SMEs, it's much more of a challenge because of the resource poverty. But if there is a tendency of being able to organize that work, then they were able to maintain the labor force. What is also essential is that from a number of the economic assistance packages, such as number 5, 18, and 21, they seem to be less effective rather than, as I mentioned, direct assistance like package number 3 or corporate tax deferrals. As a step forward for SMEs, as we consider them the backbone of any economy, as well as the entrepreneurial businesses, which are very essential, even though they're deprived of cash reserves and oftentimes also access to finances and ability to invest, they need to be much more handheld if the government is interested for long-term sustainability. So that's one step forward that would be of major consideration. So it is not going to be through separated interventions or assistance, so-called packages. Rather, it would need much more focus and much more longevity in that stance. Looking also at other countries' government assistance or any actions taken to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 economically, it is also essential to note that there is no one size that fits all. That for different countries, different methods to be working. But for the case of Armenia, particularly since SMEs seem to be very, very vulnerable and sensitive to any kind of shock, these can be global supply chains or any kind of financial recession, etc. It's much more ultimately very necessary to heavily invest and think about that as a long-term perspective. So these are just some of the observations. There is another effort that is going forward with a full appraisal of government assistance packages, because this particular survey was conducted in May 20, and there were many more assistance packages that were introduced after that. But that's not part of today's discussion, and I hope that we will have that opportunity to share with academic and general business community. That's all from my end.
Thank you, Dr. Beglayan. I would like to ask Karen Sarkavakian, our industry liaison, to give the so-called business perspective on the things. How business is adapting, what is happening in different sectors, are they reorienting themselves, are they thinking about different strategies? It's quite important to have also your perspective on what is happening in the business community.
Thank you, Dr. Gaprilian. It's not catastrophic, but you know, as far as it comes to modern research, the quicker you act, the better you are off throughout the crisis. And if you're trying to think what's the first thing that the companies need to be very quick on, you look at the expense priorities on their profit and loss statement, and it's employment. So when CBRD did the poll, did the survey, the employment numbers show that we have been largely sitting around and waiting rather than acting quick. So for example, the US economy, if you're looking at the numbers for employment, has not been sitting around and waiting. They have been acting very agilely, in an agile manner. And the unemployment figures there really do have a V shape now that more of the lockdowns have been lifted. What I'd like to share is a couple of bullet points. So if you are to gauge our ability to be resilient as a business community, we have to see whether or not we can actually measure and manage efficiency real time. And this is where most companies that I talk to lack those capabilities, because measuring efficiency real time and acting based on this measurement is one thing, and the bandwagon effect is another thing. So everyone is talking about, you know, managing employment and laying off people, furloughing people, but no one is really measuring it from the efficiency perspective. Also to mention, our cultural picture, the business decision makers' cultural bias. Is it supporting agility in employment-related decision-making, or it isn't? You know, large enterprises versus smaller enterprises. It's a big difference there, not only because small businesses are agile in their management style, and most middle-sized enterprises, for example, in the ICT, have the capabilities to track efficiency and manage efficiency real time, but also because there is no pressure on SME to act socially responsibly. But again, then what is social responsible behavior in this case? Depriving these people of quickly adapting to the new reality, or, you know, postponing this event? So what's more socially responsible? Also a rhetorical question to be asked. And of course, most businesses are now struggling to understand how do they tweak their assets and their supply chain, the relationships throughout the supply chain, the inbound part, the outbound part, to make it all work and make it all work smooth. If we look at the research that has been done, our government on May 4th actually predicted that the post-pandemic, this is May 4th, we are midway through our lockdown, and then they've predicted that it will increase, unemployment will increase only 1.3 percentage points, which is based on some sort of estimates they derive from the industry. So the industry is really not very agile in understanding what will happen to employment, because our own research shows that it's a very different situation. 20%, as many of the other presenters stated, have either lost their jobs or have witnessed someone else in their family lose their job. Of course, things have been catastrophic in micro enterprises, and as evidenced by other popular data published, for example, by the McKinsey consulting company, most micro enterprises are frantically cutting employment because they're on a survival mode, not because they have assessed efficiency, but they're on a survival mode. Whereas when it comes to our reality, companies employing 250 people or more, the survey shows that only 8% of those who experienced themselves or witnessed another one in their family losing their jobs were employed in larger companies. So when it comes to the supply chain, very many questions to be answered. Many businesses now predict that there will be a rapid sell-off of assets, because most companies intuitively or because they can measure it, mostly intuitively, they want to maintain an acceptable ROA level. So they will need to sell idle assets. And the first thing that comes to mind, how are those assets financed, and how easy will it be to sell those assets? Different situations in different businesses, but mostly they're not very difficult to sell, so that there can be a rapid sell-off. Most businesses have reported tighter controls on accounts receivable, which really chokes businesses, the reselling businesses, for example, when it comes to retail. Tight controls require more investment into their own supplies, so that they can't really cope with that, and they have to downsize their businesses. But the larger companies, they need to do this, because inevitably there will be a huge rate of defaults on accounts receivable. Most businesses have been trying to shift into the online reality, and there has been remarkable cases in this. And then what we have seen from anecdotal evidence is that everyone is now looking for opportunities locally versus regional and international suppliers, even though it may lead to quality sacrifice. So this is basically it. My own conclusion, as someone from this field, the industry, whoever is now acting through measurement using their KPI systems or developing rapidly KPI systems will be able to make decisions more accurately rather than joining the bandwagon and acting chaotically. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Now I will briefly touch upon one subject that is very popular today. It is working from home. Yet in 1993, Peter Drucker was writing that, in his opinion, commuting to work is obsolete. But still, 25 years later, majority of the world corporations actually were telling that, you know what, you have to be in place. And we don't believe that telecommuting or any type of thing, working from anywhere, working from home, is the norm. COVID has changed that significantly. For example, scholars have started to think about it as well. For example, Harvard Business Review has a 7-part series about what is office, who is commuting, who is not commuting, and why they are doing, what is workspace, how much work you are doing at home, how much work you are doing when you are in the office, is it affecting company spirit, and many other issues. I would like to show a couple of slides and then actually go over some of the implications of it. Can you see it? Are the slides visible?
Yes.
Yes.
This is work attendance of the employment position of the group. And if you can see, as in all of the world, the ones who have switched was working from home and continued to do so, was commuting, now works from home, and was working from home, now commutes. All of these positions are high with the professionals. And it's very interesting phenomenon that it is all over the same, all over the world. And if you are looking at educational background, these are people with mostly master's degrees. And also if they are getting higher education in Armenia, they are with BAs, but less so if they are Soviet graduates, which is a 5-year degree. There is also a very interesting thing when we are talking about income groups. We can see that in income groups, the highest paid group actually went to work, which is mostly the managers. I call it management oblige. Basically, while the professional infrastructure of the companies was allowed to work from home or from anywhere, actually the management had the opportunity, the burden to go and be there and maintain the workings of the company. And whether they were formally employing for them or for hire, I ran all type of cross tabulations, and now I'm trying to show you also the very interesting thing about gender. What we have is that women much more take the opportunity or took the opportunity and started to do work from home. But as I believe that this is not due to some type of a largesse that we have on behalf of the male population, but it is a structural thing, and this structural thing is about where professional women work and how many professional women are represented in management as opposed to the professional workforce. It's an interesting thing if we are looking upon income levels, upon industries, occupations, jobs. It appears that we have the same phenomenon as all over the world, that what we have is, first, overall levels of remote work are high, and there is considerable variation across industries. We have finance industry, IT industry, and interestingly enough, education, which is skyrocketing. And this is particularly in newer technologies like Zoom, which weren't existing, say, 15 or 20 years ago. Second, remote work is much more common in industries with better educated and better paid workers. Third, employees think that there has been a productive loss. There has been less productivity loss from remote working in better educated and higher paid industries. And a lot of the workers believe that this is something that is going to continue. I know that some companies in Armenia are already reimagining their space, their shifts, etc., of having a lot of people working from home also after COVID. I'm talking about particular industries, but this is reality that is coming. We are far from Finland, which actually even changed the name workplace into working place, trying to say that actually, you know, it's not important you're committing to work or not, but this is change that is happening. But I would like to bring this slide also to your attention, because workplace attendance distribution by gender is an important part of our studies, because two other faculty researchers have also touched on the issue. Dr. Gayane Barsarian has actually written a short research note that is also on our website on optimism based on gender and during the pandemic. And Dr. Knar Khachatrian and Dr. Alexander Grigoryan has also dealt with hiring and firing patterns, attendance patterns, working from home patterns, etc., also based on gender perspective. So these are quite interesting insights, I believe, that can inform us a lot in terms of future organization of workplace and how our businesses are going to respond to the situation. Now I'm going to ask Dr. Gushchan to just dwell on one interesting topic that is not as much about economic effects, but about policy means that is going to be helpful in terms of identifying and containing pandemic. Dr. Gushchan, you have a small piece on testing. Could you please dwell 2 or 3 minutes on that?
Thank you, Dr. Gabrielian. Actually, this last research is more dear to me because this is the line of research I have been doing for the last 20 years, which is in health economics. And I actually started collecting the data on pandemic and the spread of the disease way before actually things have become this crazy. And one particular thing that is very interesting for me, and I think for the economic policy perspective, is the following. We all hear about test, trace, and isolate, and testing usually in health is done for treatment purposes. But in this case, the testing is being done for isolation purposes. So more people are being tested, more people are being revealed that they have the condition, and then by isolating them, the spread is actually of the virus is going to actually get smaller. But the testing is expensive, and the thing is that the majority of tests are coming out negative, which is a good thing in this case, means the patient doesn't have the condition or whoever was tested. So what is the meaning of the test? Is it cost effective or not? This is what I am actually going to talk very quickly about definition. There is something in health economics called case fatality rate, where they take the number of people who die and divide to the number of cases. In the particular case of COVID, since the pandemic is still taking place and people are getting sick and still dying, I used another kind of measure which I called resolved case fatality, which includes death divided to death plus recovery. And as any ratio, there are a lot of places that it can be overestimated and underestimated because of the biases. Basically, we can see that we can have overestimation if we have too many deaths reported, and there are some countries that are claiming that it's taking place. But most of the thing is the cases, because we don't discover everybody who has the condition. Actually, studies showed that at least 1 out of 2 people who have the condition don't even have any symptoms. So this is what we can see, what was happening. I took the statistics starting from April 2, and actually this was a dynamic process I was collecting during the entire pandemic. We can see this number 45. This is where actually the entire world was put into the panic. This is the Italy at the beginning of pandemic, when every second patient was dying. And the thing was that they haven't been doing a big testing, and this number is very biased. So this is actually in a numerical way, we can see how the numbers for entire world, USA, and everybody is changing. And the reason of this change is not because people have learned to treat better. That's a part of it too, but mostly because the testing become more popular. So if I am looking to the correlation between the testing and fatality rate, we can see in Belarus it's -0.7, in Iceland it's -0.9, in Armenia it's 0, which means Armenia in terms of testing hasn't used the testing for the purpose of actually capturing everybody. We have done something that we call targeted testing. And I also developed a Lasso machine learning model and predicted that if we really want to decrease this case mortality rate, then for each % increase in the number of tests per million of population, this case mortality is going to decrease by 0.05 percentage points. However, the meaning of my research was looking to the testing and success story and how whether the testing was successful in Armenia or not. So the biggest success story, of course, is Singapore, and I just call it Singapore because no one has done anything like them. They have 48,000 people who got sick, only 27 people have died. At the peak, they had at the same time 20,000 people, more than 20,000 people actively sick, but the daily rate of dying wasn't bigger than 2 for the entire period. The other is something I call success due to the testing. And my favorite example is a Faroe Island. I specifically fell in love with the story that they have done. They were able to, as a local, small, actually island, they were able to develop testing independently within the island itself and implement it. The same was with Iceland. So what we can see in Iceland, they have performed a lot of tests. They almost got everybody who has the condition, and as a result, in both of these countries, the situation with pandemic is very much controlled. Okay. So what are the conclusion? The conclusion is if we can be as Singapore, we better be as a Singapore, but the ability to locally develop and run tests is critical. The ability to perform large quality of tests is critical too in order to actually contain the spread of the virus. My expert opinion for the large quantity of tests being estimated based on other countries is at least 100,000 tests per 1 million population. This is what a country should be able to do, and this test should be done within 2 weeks in order to almost capture the big portion of people who have the condition, so you can actually do test and isolate. However, when you do targeted testing, which has been done for Armenia, this test, trace, isolate logic is not working. It is efficient only at the beginning when there are few people who are sick. However, when there are a lot of outbreaks and there is no way to control, targeting testing is absolutely obsolete. It's not going to help to contain the virus. So my conclusion is that the testing, large number of testing should be combined with other method, which is isolation and other restrictions to be effective. If we only perform few things, which is isolation, but we do not perform the testing the way the successful countries have done, we are not going to actually get grip with this condition and actually contain it. So that was the piece on.
Thank you, Dr. Hushan. Now, I would like to give a couple of questions that our audience is asking, and I hope that you will answer. And I will take one, although Karen has already answered about banking, but I will get a bit more detail, and then I'll get the other questions that I see are coming, and I'll ask our panelists to answer. How the banking system is doing in general. Are there any worrying trends in the banking system? Not yet. The banking system is doing good. They are actually performing quite well, and in the second quarter they posted quite good earnings. But there is the issue that because of the widespread urge of the government and also the goodwill on the banking system, all the payments that have not been done haven't been penalized by the banks. The banks have given, as opposed to tax authorities, the banks have given credits to the small companies and the ones that are not working, not only small companies, the companies that are having problems with payments, which means that they haven't actually classified these loans. I believe that there will be problems around in the fourth quarter, beginning of the next year, in the first quarter of next year. But in general, banking system is well capitalized, and I don't believe that there is going to be systemic shock for the banking system. But as particular industries are going to do quite bad, particularly tourism sector, particularly hospitality sector, etc. And in Armenia, they were one of the sectors that have been financed quite a lot by the banking system. We are going to see this number showing up in the balance sheets. But as I would like to mention once more, this is not anything of dangerous type. They are not as large to threaten anything in the banking system. As far as sustainability is concerned. There is a question posed: if in the economy of Armenia, what field, in your opinion, has the potential is worth to develop before the appearance of COVID-19 and now? Basically, has COVID-19 altered the industrial prospects of industry development in Armenia? Please, anyone of the faculty who would like to take a shot.
Before and after invest in healthcare.
Well, I tried to answer the person in private, but I might contribute publicly as well. So here is a big macro shift in consumption, home consumption. Home consumption and everything related to home consumption has gone up by approximately 20% over last year, based on anecdotal evidence. This is not only because people work from home, but because people spend more time at home. And if you think on a wider scale, this is not going away for a very long time. And I know it's not classified as an industry sector, but home consumption and whatever is related with home consumption is very much going up.
It's very interesting. 2 days ago, I was reading an article about farming in the United States and how the patterns of home consumption are changing. And as many more people are willing to cook at home and not dining out, as they are buying more wholesale and less fancy things. Interestingly enough, it's changing also the demand on agricultural goods. And now even the farmers in the United States are thinking what crops they are going to use and how much. And this is the fastest shift in the demand of this type that has happened. Nobody was expecting that the consumption patterns are going to change this fast. The same thing is perhaps going to be happening not only in the United States, but elsewhere. Not to the same extent, but what Karen is saying is exactly the same thing. More home cooking, more cost-conscious buying. Those who are in the United States buying at Costco would understand the same pattern is going on similarly here. The other questions. Do you see any other opportunity? Do you see any opportunities for Armenian businesses to take advantage of the current disruptions to enter new markets, possibly internationally?
Actually, I wanted to say exactly that in the previous thing, saying that we don't need to focus, because currently with the global value changes going into nothing, actually all the countries are trying to diversify whatever they had, and also they were trying to nearshore. So Armenia should just go in, all business people in Armenia should try to get all the possible things that can be exported, and now there are a lot of markets that are being opened both in Russia and in Europe and in Arabic countries that actually Armenia can be trying to be substituting the usual partners that the world was having. Maybe there's just too general saying, and maybe it sounds too wishful thinking, but actually it is a thing. Currently, a lot of near shoring is happening in all over the world, with a lot of companies just being worried that they cannot rely anymore on one shipper from somewhere and one supplier from Malaysia or somewhere else. They want to be sure that if anything happens again, they are not going to be in danger. So we can go and try to get that. I think that's my answer to this question and the previous.
And then locally, there has been a spike in RFQ procedures generally, because like you say, Gurgen, the supply chain, the inbound part, is right now so vibrant, absolutely, and the raw materials, the semi-finished products internally in Armenia, this nearshoring is very real here.
Well, there is an issue, there is a question, can AUA, maybe via CBRD, help SMEs with expertise, advice on strategies to deal with the impact of the pandemic? It's not that we have a lot of spare capacity to deal with the business and industry all the time, but as part of CBRD and as part of the job of our industry liaison, we are constantly working with the companies and trying to give our students real life experiences when they are studying. And we have a lot of courses that have real life projects, and I would like to, Karen, briefly talk about them. And if the companies are interested in them, we are more than ready to include them into our fall programs, because we have a lot of courses that use student labor to pinpoint problems and ask and offer some solutions to the businesses. Please.
Thank you. Very briefly, we offer 3 types of engagement. First is when the instructor works with the company management to tailor projects that the class can do. And then the second type is more deep, when we have our graduating students, both in the master's and bachelor's program, being tasked with a real life consulting project tailored to the company needs, and would deliver on that project. And then the third type is when we place interns after working through a meaningful scope for the internship, and that's a graded internship. Now there is another mode that has been emerged, and Haik Kamalian is here. We have been soliciting research projects at a fraction of the cost compared to the consulting companies for those who need tailored consulting projects, but supervised by faculty, supervised by professional researchers. And this is the paid option of engaging students as well. But we heavily rely on the first 3.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there seem no more questions unless Narek can confirm it. Okay, there is one question. There is one question. What has been the impact of the sharp decrease in the number of international flights coming into Yerevan, as much of the financial investment into Armenia comes from abroad? Also, many sectors were directly impacted by the absence of tourists. These are very good questions. I think the most important part, if we are dealing with financial inflows from abroad, there are 3 directions. Number 1 is trade, number 2 is investment, number 3 is remittances. Investment is going down everywhere because almost every business is thinking about nearshoring also in these terms. of investing in their country and not dispersing their resources too thin and stretching into other markets. This is not the thinking of today. As far as the trade, you can see that in Armenia, both the imports and exports have been going down. Unless there was this relatively stable performance on behalf of the mining industry, we would have much worse. And the first question was answered in more detail on remittances by Gurgen, because he explicitly incorporated a loss of remittances in his model. The one more or less comparable experience that we have is in 2015, when we had about 10 billion economy, we had a loss in remittances about $500 million, which was about 5% of GDP, which is quite significantly strong. Now we are going to have something of that sort as well, I believe. This is all three questions that are being affected. And there is Martini Sargsyan asking Mr. Sarkavakian and honorable panelists, would appreciate to learn your perspective about how the COVID pandemic is influencing Armenian businesses. Can you go on the question? Armenian businesses, investment patterns and interests related to the fourth industrial revolution agenda. If anybody would like to talk about fourth industrial revolution?
Still accelerating.
Well, I think it's just a remark. I think it's relatively early to give a solid, justified response to this question. And in general, I think that the whole thing is that whether the businesses are going to consider this to be a temporary shock that will be over soon and they can go back to their ordinary business routines, or they will grasp it as a situation that is the new normal and they will start changing. But I will leave this to my business colleagues to give a very specific answer. But in general, from behavioral perspective, that's what's going to shape this.
Okay, I will take also the last question. And are there estimates on growth changes in the healthcare industry? How much of the supply and demand for health services and products in? I would start briefly with my brief interlocutions with the health industry tell. It is interesting that all the other demands for all other health services, non-COVID related, has gone down, but COVID related expenses of the population have gone up. So if you are looking at the hospitals as a healthcare, as an industry, and not publicly provided healthcare, they are not yet operating at full capacity if we are talking about healthcare as business. But they are not doing very bad because they are not completely drained of the financial resources. As far as the capacity and whether they are coping with it in a better way or not is difficult to say because there is no data. Just to inform you that the government just initiated a law which says that under pandemic, under extraordinary rule, the government may take over managing private hospitals and private health clinics. And nobody knows exactly how they are going to do that. And the bill went to the parliament and is stalled there because Everybody accepts that in general this should be, but what is the operational mode? There was a debate in the government meeting whether they are going to do, and this is going to have an impact on profitability, whether they have to at least promise certain type of profitability to these companies. And the government perspective was nothing of the sort. This is a situation like war, and we are not going to give them a minimal return type of thing. We are just taking over because there is a life and death matter. But in the parliament, there were more questions to it, and the bill is still being debated. So this much of the scant evidence that we have on the healthcare industry as both business and also how it's going to operate. There is one concern health-wise, just to add, and then I'll give the floor to my colleagues to add something. People have been importantly and vitally underusing health services that are not related to COVID, which means that we are running at risk of having more heart attacks and other diseases in the coming months. Please, colleagues.
I just wanted to say, and again, referring to Dr. Rhodes' question, because there are no flights, medicinal tourism is basically dead. And this was the high margin part, although not a big part, but the high margin part where margins allowed investment and innovation and new technology. And this is non-essential medical care that attracted a lot of outsiders, foreigners into the country. I was talking the other day with owners of 2 clinics, and they estimate now that their business is down almost 80% because they rely on internal demand, for example, for services such as plastic surgeries, not reconstructive plastic surgeries, but plastic surgeries that are for appearance, for example. And then dental is down to more than 50%.
Sorry, we are running out of time. If anybody had a desire for a nose job, this is the high time to do it. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending our webinar. Thanks to the faculty for devoting their time and contributing research. And all of you can find our research note at the CBRD website. You can also find the results of our survey, and there is more to come. Hopefully there will be more survey and more research notes by our faculty. Thanks.